Born Primitive Outdoor is proud to partner with Montana Knife Company, Marsupial Gear, Evolution Outdoors, Sheep Feet, and Capture Gear. Thanks for tuning in, and thanks to our sponsors. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Born Primitive Outdoor podcast. Today, I have an actual special guest. Sometimes I say that, and it's not that special of a guest, but today is. I have the actual president of Born Primitive on the podcast. Pretty much, more or less, the first person I met with Born Primitive through his brother, which we can go into that in a minute. But that's Tony. Am I saying it right? Strasiser? Tony Strasiser?
Strasiser is the proper way, but hey, we can roll with Strasiser too.
Yeah, there you go. So you are now and have been the president for how long at BP?
It's been not quite a year in the new role. Gotcha.
And then, as far as like backstory for those, who don't follow along, because I guess I should throw that in. Tony and Bear do a podcast with Born Primitive Maine. So with BP, we have the Born Primitive Maine, which is the athletic CrossFit type clothing line. We have Born Primitive Tactical and Born Primitive Outdoor. We also have 3 podcasts to convolute shit even more. So we have a tactical outdoor hunting and a kind of fitness self-improvement business podcast. So for people that don't listen to that podcast, kind of give everybody a background of how you started with BP, everything that you would think of, because you started at the ground level and ended up king of the hill. So,
yeah. So I started 6 years ago now with the company and came in with very little business experience. I had helped manage a fitness gym, but got an intro to Bear, the founder and CEO, who you mentioned I do a podcast with. And at the time, there was only one salaried employee, and there were, I think, 3 or 4 hourlies that were just helping in the warehouse. And this is when both him and Mao were running around with their hair on fire, doing literally 15 different jobs, especially Mao. And we got introduced to each other through a mutual friend, actually 2 mutual friends. And ironically, Mao said, no, at the time, the salaried employee and all of the hourlies were only girls. And Mao said, no, we're not hiring a guy. I don't care how smart he is. We're not having a guy in here. Well, Bear overrode her, and him and I just sat down and had a conversation. And Bear's pitch was about as simple as this. He said, hey, man, I know you're very overqualified given your degree in college and kind of just sitting here talking to you. I'm not going to fuss this for you. I will pay you just to start in the warehouse, but I can promise you one thing. There's going to be a ton of opportunity here. And we talked around a couple other things for probably 10 minutes, but that was literally my interview. That was like, there was no specific questions. So that's how I got rolling. And it's interesting too. And I think we all have these moments in our life where the timing just could not have been better. I had graduated school, thought I was going to work in I actually had a pre-med bio major, thought I would go to med school, realized very quickly that being part of that system is not something I wanted to do. So kind of pivoted to more like exercise, kinesiology. That's where I was kind of working at a gym and then helping run it as well. And had kind of the realization that there was a bit of a low ceiling in that field. And it was almost me trying to continue my college athletic career because sports had always been such a big part of my life. So I kind of had the realization literally 6 months before having that conversation with Bear of I'm looking to make a change. And I really didn't even know specifically what that was. So that's where I say the timing of the conversation with Bear couldn't have been better because I was kind of at a complete reset stage. So literally filled into the warehouse as the only guy employee. Like I said, I was probably the 6th or 7th hourly when you factor in the salary and then Mal and Bear employee here at Born Primitive. But the growth was already exponential right there. By the time, I think 3 months after I got brought in, we brought in an additional 4 people. So with the hyper growth that we were going through, there was so much opportunity to take on more responsibility, which led to exponential growth. And so within 4 months, I was kind of a supervisor, then we had, that's right when COVID hit. So our manager was pregnant at the time, and it was kind of a weird time for everyone, but she specifically kind of was very careful about being in the warehouse when that first, like in March of 2020. So I took over managing the warehouse, which at this point had become a team of, I think then it was probably 10 to 12 people just in the warehouse operation. And then did that for another year. We did a huge warehouse transition, which me and the other manager, she was back in the seat at that time, kind of took point on. And then that's when Bear, like, and these conversations have been happening all along, but I had the opportunity then to shift into a role doing our global expansion. We had already expanded into Canada, EU, Australia, and there were a couple other countries we wanted to target where Bear had prior kind of military relationship. So I did that for 2 years, and then transitioned to a VP, the vice president of the company, for 2 years, and then have been the president for the last year. And we could drill down on any aspect of more the VP and president role, because those were, when you look at my role now and kind of what my role is within the company, like these last 4 years have really been the formative years to allow me to even do it at a competent level, because a title means dog shit if you can't fill into the role and kind of have a clear direction of both what you're trying to do from like a priority and kind of initiative standpoint, but then also, and you know this as well as anyone, Aaron, like when you're in these leadership positions, there's an underbelly of managing just the overall kind of personality of the company, meaning we now have 100 employees, and each one of those 100 employees has their own unique personality, their own unique kind of demands for what they want out of a work culture. So there's a balance there of both achieving the business executive or the business priorities, while also kind of putting additional leaders at the director level, at the manager level in place, so that you're building a true kind of sustainable ecosystem for both the individuals involved, but then the company as a whole when you look at things like overall profitability. So it's been an incredible journey, and I say it all the time on our podcast. I'm so grateful for the last 6 years kind of shaped me in a way that like I know I will hold in high regard for the rest of my life. And candidly, it was a fucking pressure cooker. Like this place, and even from the outside, you could probably sense that without knowing anything about our internal operation. Like we have grown exponentially over the last 6 years. So the lessons you learn within that, both about yourself, but then also about leading others and leading teams and being able to clearly state priorities and stay focused, has truly been invaluable to my development as an individual.
Yeah, and I think that, when people, rewinding, right, when you're talking about leadership and you've, I don't want to say graduated, right, but you've learned along the way, like we all have, right? Like there may be natural leaders. You may have an innate ability to lead, but it's a lot more than just the ability to lead when you're talking about a company, a large company, and then the growth of that large company and keeping the train on the tracks, because you talked about it a minute ago, personalities. For me, the hardest thing to deal with is 700 different personalities, or 7 or 15, because that is the bane of my existence in leadership. Is this person needs to be coddled, this person you got to be a dick to, this person you don't have to do anything. And then also, with all the military people that we have working for us in the military, you can ask anyone to do anything at any time, and they have to do it within reason. And the better soldier has to do more. You just keep piling shit on the good soldier's plate, and the ones that suck just keep sucking. That doesn't work, right? That does not work well long term at all. And then, having a dominant leadership, an aggressive leadership, that only works for some people. Having a laid back, and so learning that along the way, and it's not easy. And you kind of have to be. I feel you have to have a softer side in leadership when you're at as your role grows and you are getting more and more people under you, rather than an aggressive in the civilian life. I'd be interested to get your take on that.
Yeah, I think, for my like founder, or my base principle is like, and it sounds a little cliche, but it's like, know yourself, know your people, meaning like you've got to be taking very close or kind of taking care of yourself in a way that allows you to be sustainable over time. Because I see the leaders that like either they overextend themselves, they burn themselves out. And it's like, yeah, that may work in the short term, but maintenance of your own system, I think it's delusional to think that you can give anything to others that you're not giving to yourself. So that's kind of like priority one. And then my style, and here's where you hit it on the head, like there are 50 different leadership styles, and I don't think there's a right and a wrong way to do it, but I think there are trends, and from my own, for my own style, there's where kind of knowing yourself comes in, is because especially in my position, and I felt the pull of this a little bit, is that when you're a young person in kind of an executive role, it's very easy to think you need to become something, meaning, oh, I have this title now, I need to act a certain way, I need to do a certain thing. And that's natural. Like it's a natural human response to kind of like almost overmold into a role that you think you need to be different for. But for me, I recognize like that felt extremely disingenuous. So for me, my style really came out like I started to recognize that my style does relate to kind of what you said, being I'm a laid back leader, but where I tend to get a little more, I guess I would use like aggressively focused, is when we will agree on a system, meaning we're going to agree on a system to track your performance. I don't give a shit how you do it in between kind of what we agree on and then the end state outcome. But where I am very aggressive is if things aren't going, if we're not tracking to the system that we've agreed on, that's where it doesn't come across as like brashness, but it'll just be like, hey, we're going to sit down and discuss this because there is these numbers or this thing we agree to is what sums up to the total company goal. So I'm very laid back in the sense of letting people express their own style to achieve the desired outcome. But where my focus and intensity comes in is when a system isn't working. That's where I've really learned to kind of lean into using what you would typically call just like your authoritarian power of like being able to step in and say, no, like remove all emotion, remove all subjectivity. We, meaning say you and a director, agreed that this was the goal and we are not achieving this now. That doesn't mean it's your fault in particular. So yeah, just a long-winded way to say it's going to vary, and it's going to vary like anything in life. There's seasons to it. Like there have been seasons here at Born Primitive where for 3 or 4 months, my anxiety levels are through the roof because we are dealing with 15 fires. And you know this as a former and current kind of businessman, is that that season will come. There will be craziness. There'll be shit shows, and then it'll ebb off, and then it'll come back. And it's like that's it. Yeah, just like in life, there's going to be seasons to that. And so I think being I like symbolically, I think of it as like be a tree within your organization where like, yeah, there can be crazy fucking storms that knock a couple branches off and maybe even rip a root up. But like you're a foundational piece there, and you're grounded in a way that people feel comfortable coming to you. People feel comfortable coming to you with problems, with good things, with personal things, because there's where if you build that trust with your leaders, meaning let's say directors or even vice presidents, when you start to build that trust of like, damn, this dude's solid, he doesn't get emotional, and he's always there for me when I need him, people will do exponentially more than when you think as a leader you need to be hard on their ass and aggressive and telling them constantly how to do their job. That may work in the short term, but to me, from my experience, it's a really shitty and unsustainable way to manage over the long term.
No, I agree. And, and I have been in a leadership chair for a very long time. And when I say that with BP, and I don't know if you would agree with it, I'm hiding probably more from leadership than I should. I'm kind of just hanging back. I'm remote, not probably contributing to the company as much as I should on the leadership side. Mostly I needed a break, but like through the years when I was young and was put in a leadership role, I agree 100%. You initially have that, this isn't exactly what you said. I got to prove something. I'm in this role. Yep. I'm going to make a difference. I may be young. Fuck all you old guys. I know better. Not good, right? You don't want to do that, right? So, and you learn that quickly. And then as that kind of progresses and you learn your own, you're writing your own book, right? When it comes, and you're going to adapt, you're going to, I read a lot of books on leadership and personal development. And I say I read, I don't read shit. I listen. And you get little knickknacks and tricks and things like that help. But man, just ass in the seat of a leadership position, you cannot, there's no book you will read to prepare you for some of the things that will happen when it comes to leadership, in my opinion. And when I say that, never in a million years did I think I would be dealing with a delivery driver that hit a vehicle in the McDonald's parking lot and then ran away, and then the police are, in my office talking to me about I'm like, well, this is what I thought today would be like. So how do I counsel this guy? This guy is I'm going off the deep end here, but giving examples. This guy is a stellar employee, always dependable, but Jesus, he speeds a lot and he's a horrible driver and he's had 2 accidents. How do you counsel that, right? How do you take this guy and say, dude, you're a stud, but you're a fucking liability? Like, dude, you got to sit him down. And how is his personality? I'm only bringing this up because this happened. What's his personality like? Is he going to quit if I bring this up and I'm going to lose my best driver? Is this one of those things where I'm like, all right, dude, I got to put you on a 90-day kind of a review thing, whatever. And then next day, my buddy got 2 people. I say he was a buddy, but my buddy got 2 women pregnant on 2 separate weekends in 1 month. Wasn't expecting that in leader. I was thinking, man, I just thought I had to make sure that the building got built and whatever. We had enough caulking. Fuck, that's the easy part, right? It's not to me, again, it's not really the operational side. That part you can learn and whatever. Man, it's people. People is the number one thing. If you can learn to manage personalities and people, that is the ticket to me, to being the best leader you can have.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And there's where I do feel blessed that I naturally like people. I enjoy spending time around people. I enjoy getting to know people. And exactly what you're saying, I've seen extremely competent businessmen who don't have that. And as long as you're honest about that, you can find a role where you can still deliver the same kind of business results without having to deal with the people. But yes, the leaders that even here that I will elevate exponentially quicker are the ones that have uncanny ability to connect with individuals while also not being like a people pleaser, because there's a fine line there too. And once again, as you said, with your ass in the seat of a leadership role, you will learn this, is that if you tend towards kind of being an agreeable person and an empathetic person, you will find that you have so many challenging discussions that you will just yes, man, to get through, or kind of just give a soft response to get through a conversation. And honestly, I would say at times that actually might be the path of least resistance, but the majority of times, and here's where just I think finding your voice as a leader is so important, is you start to learn to just be as direct, but still with a sense of empathy, but as direct as you can be within a meeting, not to ruffle feathers, not to make people uncomfortable, but because you nip in the ass the back end of having to then have 7 cleanup conversations because you didn't want to have it in the initial conversation. So, and there too, that relates to the ability to manage yourself, because the examples you gave, if you're not managing yourself, these things, they take up fucking space in your brain. So then you go home and you're thinking and you're ruminating on these big ticket issues that are happening at work. And if you don't have methods for clearing that, whether it's exercise, sleep, meditation, if you don't have a modality edibles. To clear those things,
edibles.
Yeah,
that's what I've been
edibles,
psychedelic.
Yeah. I'm in that space as well, is that you become kind of just a fucking overflowing pile of stress that's going to influence your leadership style. Then that influences your personal life. And then all of a sudden you've lost that ground that made you a great leader, because you're letting these things just pile up on top of you. And there's where that circles back to the quicker you can nip things in the butt, the better, because those things do just, they take up space in your head. And if those things start to overflow and you feel like there's more than you can manage, both from a day to day, but then also just from your psyche, that will start to influence negatively your life in just about every avenue.
Well, and I can tell you, without going, I learned a lot from, previous employer, things I did right, things I did wrong, the employer before that, where I was in a large leadership role. when I say learn with what we're talking about, when you touch the stove and burn your hand enough in leadership, you're either going to me, never be in a leadership role, right? You'll just step back and say, this isn't for me. Or each time you touch the stove, just like mistakes in the wilderness and backpack hunting or whatever, you touch that stove, you heal, you figure it out. What do I need to do to never touch that stove again for this specific issue? And the problem with that stove and leadership is you're touching the fucking thing all the time, right? There's always something new you're burning your hand on in leadership. And that may be, when I say leadership, that could be inventory management. All right. That could be HR. That could be, there's so many different things. And so, which I didn't really anticipate this podcast to be about leadership, but I'm glad because I'm liking the direction this is going. There's always going to be the group of people below you that are smarter than you. And it always happens in business, right? Like they may be outside sweeping the floor and everybody above them is stupid. And then you're going to have middle management that's the same way of, constantly undermining, potentially undermining or I don't want to say contradicting, but there's always a better way, and whatever way you're doing is not the right way. And that kind of environment is very difficult, to deal with. When I say that, meaning when you have a good solid core crew, like you said, the wind can blow, rip a tree down, couple roots pop up, you're still going to be fine, right? Because you have a good crew. When you have that cancerous crew, those are the things where you were talking about nipping things in the bud. If you let that cancer grow with the people under you, whether that's your fault or not, the end outcome is bad. And a lot of times it's not fixable. When I say that, meaning as that cancer grows, if it grows too much, there is nothing that's going to happen to fix that minus a massive hatchet of an arm, right? Just getting rid of a bunch of toxic people. I don't know if you agree with that or not, but that's definitely been my experience.
For sure. And I think there's layers there of how I would view what you just said. And this is kind of my style is like, let's say you're in a leadership role, the people underneath you, I view as a mirror, meaning and that's not meant to objectify in any way. It means I mean it almost in a self-reflective way to say, if you're sensing things from the team, I instantly start to self-reflect on, is this a result of something I'm doing? Now you have to be careful there too, because you shouldn't always bear every burden that the team is feeling, because sometimes it has nothing to do with you. But for me, it's a great number one to start with of step one, self-reflect and be willing to have open conversations with individuals that you feel tension with, because a lot of times, and it relates exactly to what you said about a cancer growing, is that we sense something from an innate kind of human ability to sense, whether it's with discomfort or unease around certain individuals. And there's where it comes in of instead of just having a conversation from openness, because what also doesn't work is to sit them down and be like, hey, I feel this way. What is going on? It's no, you need to be really receptive and almost be able to self-reflect and call yourself out and say, hey, I've been showing up in this way during our meetings, and I realize it's having a negative influence on it. I'd love to sit down and get your side to it, because I don't think the way we're going about things right now is healthy for how we're going to project into the future. Then, and this is what we talked about at the beginning of the podcast, as you build that type of foundational trust with individuals, your feedback loop on information gets so much smaller, because as you grow in leadership roles, you're further and further a lot of times away from ground truth. And that's why I wouldn't trade for the world, having worked through the different levels of the company, because I still have, I can hop back into a ground truth very quickly, because I did those roles. I did every single role leading up to my current one. And what can happen, and I've seen this time and time again, is if a leader doesn't have that ground truth and they don't have good self-awareness, there will start to build a resentment between the individuals that have that ground truth and the leader, because the leader has a level of authority that they don't realize is influencing every interaction they're having with their team members. And then they'll get pissed off because they're like, well, why didn't people come and tell me that this is fucked up? Or why didn't they come tell me that this was happening wrong? And it's because there's where having just an ounce of self-awareness goes so far, because you can recognize like, whoa, I'm actually in a position of authority, and these individuals who are 4 levels below me, they don't feel comfortable coming to talk to me. And that actually a lot of times can be the root of kind of those things that become cancerous. Now, on the flip side of that, there are certainly instances where you are just like, you cannot be in the trenches on it, whether it's a certain department or a certain kind of lane within the company. And you do get one individual who is not managing themselves properly, or they're honestly just their perception of what is happening. And then that's where that can spread very quickly as well. So to me, and this is just the way I view the world in its entirety, is like, it really is a game of self-maintenance, meaning a self-maintenance of the leader, a game of self-maintenance at every level of the company. And that's why, you have to be, like, we can't be sitting here telling people how to eat and move and kind of breathe. But like that, now you're getting into the other aspect of kind of where I have passion, is that like, if those foundational pieces aren't in place for yourself and your employees, how can you expect them to show up in a way that is sustainable over time? Like, they will inevitably, either mentally or physically, start to break down. So there's where I think there's that's kind of a nuanced lane of leadership too, is that both maintaining your own state and then also having the ability to positively influence the state of your employees, because that has nothing to do with work, meaning seemingly how a person eats, how they breathe, how they move, how they sleep has nothing to do with work. But in reality, it has everything to do with work. And I think the idea that you can just kind of split those two off, and I'm going to be a shithead outside of work and do whatever I want and act like a heathen, and then I'm just going to show up to work and be a great performer. From my experience, that is hardly ever the case over the long term. It can happen in short term. So yeah, just a little tangent too about like being able to manage your own system. And when I say system, I mean like your own mental state, your own body, your own ability to stay calm, just your overall kind of energy. And then also being able to positively influence and know where your team is at, because there too comes in the seasonality of like, if you just run fucking hot all the time, if you're always revving your engine and your team picks up on that and they start to do the same thing, you can actually achieve really good results in the short term. But I've seen it over and over again where a team will break down over time because you just can't sustain it. It's not in human nature to just be redlining all the time. And I actually think culturally right now, we've gotten a little addicted to that. And we actually put that on a pedestal, the whole like grind. And it's like, no, actually that leads to inefficiency. It's like work hard and then also rest hard, as trite as it sounds, because then you're allowing your system to reset instead of just keeping it revved hot the whole time.
No, I agree. Give me, we're going to take a 1 minute pause. Don't go anywhere. My dogs are going ape shit crazy, but I want to add to what you were just talking about. Jerry, I'll edit all this out. Give me 1 sec, dude. My dogs are going crazy.
Go get them.
All right, I'm back. Sorry about that. Jerry,
no worries.
I apologize. You have to edit that out. So as far as like you said, almost like in today's day and age, the all go, no quit. I can tell you from my own experience, which I don't do this anymore, that shit is short-lived. And what you gain from the I work harder than everyone else, I'm here more, I'm here first, I'm here last, no one works harder than me, it's good. And again, this is just my opinion, is one, when you're telling people that below you, I don't know, while in theory it should make them work harder, it also can be somewhat degrading, where it's like, okay, so no matter what I'm going to do is never going to be good enough because you're just the best, right? And I was this guy, right? Of like, I'm doing more than all of you, where rather than just say it, rather than saying it, just working extremely hard. You don't need to tout how hard you work all the time or whatever else. Just working hard shows that. But as far as your mental, you can only burn the candle at both ends for so long before you snap. And your personal, your spiritual, emotional, your own well-being eventually is going to suffer greatly. And then as that suffers, it trickles down as well. And when I say trickles down, while you may have, if you're working construction, it's the equivalent of working 7 10s or 6 10s or 6 12s. you can only push a human for so long. While you may be getting a lot done in the short term, in the long term, at the tail end of that specific building or whatever else, your work ethic, your attention to detail, and everything else will start to look like shit towards the tail end because you burnt yourself out. So while it works for a short period of time, man, I have not found that. I'm not saying you want to be lazy. You just want to be very efficient and cognizant. So if you're the guy constantly screaming about you work harder than everyone else and you've got some downsides to that, it's your job to maintain and maintenance your own schedule, your own soul, mental well-being, mental health, and everything else, because it trickles down to everyone below you. They're going to work hard too, and they're going to try to keep up, and they're going to, be pushing themselves to this outer limit of what they can. And it looks really good on Instagram, and it looks really good to feel tough. And it's a fucked system to me. It is not good because you have to take care of yourself, and it's a trickle-down effect from my experience.
Yeah, and I think it becomes a form of just like inflating your ego in the sense of like you get validation from labeling yourself as that, and that's where like in my role, and I'm comfortable at any level sitting down and have this conversation, and it relates back to like the first 5 minutes of our discussion. It's like, no, let's sit down and agree on an outcome, like because then what I have seen is I've actually seen people who have miserable focus rely entirely on the fact that they're a quote unquote hard worker. When you actually look at what they're producing, I'm like, you're not actually producing anything that has a tangible outcome as far as what we're trying to drive to as a business. So yes, I do respect the fact that you're working your ass off, but instead of you just burning yourself out, let's sit down, let's agree on what we're actually trying to achieve. And then if you want to work like a psychopath to achieve that, please, by all means, go ahead and do that. But I'm not putting that pressure on you as a leader, because as you said, and once again, we all go through these phases as leaders, is like when you set that tone from the top. Now here's where I will say, Aaron, and like here's where like the kind of like the Bill Gates, the Bezos come in, is that if you have that and you're extremely focused and outcome driven, then you can conquer the damn world. But that, for a lot of people, including myself, like that's not enticing at all. Like you almost have to be a sociopath then to do that. So there's where it's like what you said is, hey, hard work is a part of the equation, but if there isn't a focus on what the actual goal is, what are we driving towards? Because what I've found in myself and in others is that a lot of times, and like engineers are notorious for this, especially like software engineers, is that a lot of times the smartest people in the room will find a very easy way to do something that somebody else thought they needed to work their ass off to do. And there's where the light bulb comes on. It's like, well, holy shit, we're all just fluffing each other, getting excited that we're working hard, when in reality, we didn't actually need to be doing this. And we're using that as a form of self-validation. So yeah, couldn't agree more. And there's where it comes in, like the kind of mental side of this, the spiritual side, the physical side, is that I truly believe that being balanced in all of these different areas, and when I say balanced, of course that looks different for every single person, but at least putting some time daily into those areas will actually provide a disproportionate amount of value to who you are as a leader, rather than thinking working 2 hours is going to do that.
I agree. I think some of the other, things as we're diving down this rabbit hole, and I do want to rewind real quick on the all go, no quit thing. It is the environment we live in. You look at like, I don't know, what the fuck is the Navy SEAL? Jocko, constantly taking a photo of his phone at 4:20 or whatever time he, wakes up, or, no one cares, work harder. That's you want to work hard. I'm not going to, I don't want to get a bunch of messages of saying, hey, you're saying be lazy. But again, efficiency is key. And if you have to work that hard to be efficient, there is a hitch in the giddy up. You're not using your team appropriately. You are a micromanager. You're probably a fucking control freak. I hate working for those, right? If you have to do all that, you're not being a good leader, and you are not maybe divvying up the load below you. Sometimes you have
it's an addiction. I've seen this time and time again. It's a prison that people build for themselves and then bitch about being in prison. Meaning, and of course I'm speaking metaphorically, is that like
it's a fucking prison, but yeah.
It really is like any other addiction where you complain, like you complain about it. I'm working so fucking hard. But then when you really sit down with those individuals, and when I say individuals, like I think if you're self-reflective, you can find this in yourself, maybe not as egregious as you said of somebody that's a complete control freak, but we all have these tendencies within us. And you sit down and you recognize that even given more time that allows them to not work hard, they start to spiral then, because then you recognize, oh, you're actually using this. You're using this whole idea of I have to work hard as a way to just actually not address the other 14 monsters you have in your closet that have been in there for way too long, and you've been unwilling to go open that door and kind of not even wrestle, but just like see that those are in there. So yeah, it can quite literally, I've seen this manifest itself as a literal almost addiction where individuals label themselves as a hard worker. And once again, and I'll caveat it too with what you said, like hard work is a very fucking important part of the equation in whatever you're doing. But if that's the lever that you just hit every single time in order to try to change kind of your life situation, as you said, I just think it's a really inefficient way to go.
Yeah. And talking about that, like, let's break this down. Like, so when you're, whatever the case may be, whatever you're doing, right, you're going to have, and I've had this conversation with a lot of people. Jealousy will get involved because one person's good at something that's maybe funner than what somebody else is good at, or, whatever. In my case, obviously, I get to be out in the outdoors a lot. If you don't like sleeping on the ground and freezing your balls off and, answering 1.5 million questions, that may not be the life for you. But when you're looking at it, I'm not that good at paperwork, for example. I use ChatGPT like crazy. When something, you have the subject matter expert, you have a field guy, you've got the accountant, you've got the logistics, operations, or whatever else. If you're the leader that hires really good people and puts them in the position they should be in, and then checks on them occasionally to get filled in on how things are going, and the person that is most qualified is in the position they should be in, you're probably going to be okay. And when I say that, that takes a little bit of time to do, but you may have someone below you that is extremely good at, let's just say, operation, like the ops manager.
Yep.
But he hates his job. So he's constantly bitching about Tony because Tony's fucking off all day and gets to do podcasts, and Aaron sucks because he's out in the outdoors all the time fishing. And so while that person may be the most skilled at that job, if he's constantly fucking pissed off that everybody else is doing something cool, that happens too, right? And so I don't know why I'm bringing all this up. I'm just going over all the shit I've had to deal with for the last 20 years. It is very difficult to nip that one in the bud as well, because you, Tony, will be in the position of shit. This guy's a rock star, but all he does is fucking complain all day. What do I do? Right? Like, what do I do to remedy that? I can't make the guy good in the outdoors. He's been a dork his whole life, right? He can't go fish. He sucks at it. He can't nav, right? And you're not going to make me good at paperwork. You might improve it a little bit, but you don't change the stripes on a zebra, right? So is that person worthwhile to keep? How do you keep them? How do you make him happy? And when do you pull the pin, right? When do you say, look, dude, I'm sorry, but you're never fucking happy. You're good at your job, but you're like Eeyore every Monday at 7, right? You just hate everything. And leading people through that is very difficult. And I kind of went on a tangent there, but as far as people listening to this for leadership development and everything else, there's 2 things I think that are major downfalls in leadership. One, if you cannot be approached by everyone under you, there's a problem. I would say that is the number one issue, whether that be an employee, middle management, or upper management. If you can't at least have a conversation, leaving most of the emotion out of it, all of the ego, to remedy whatever issue for the greater good. If you are not approachable, I would say that's the number one issue with with bad leaders. Would you agree, disagree? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I said that earlier, that if you don't have good feedback loops for information within your organization, you will become extremely out of touch, and in both a relationship aspect, but also from like just a purely like a data kind of just overall kind of business sense very quickly. And to touch on kind of what you said prior about kind of a high performer who is kind of the Eeyore, and once again, it's a great call out, because it's funny how these archetypes, regardless of what organization you're in, you will have certain tendencies that present themselves regardless of what type of business or even what size of business you're in. And I think there it becomes like, how I approach those is like, sit down with that individual, tell them everything they're great at, and say, also, here's the things I'm recognizing from more of just like how you're showing up to work, how you're verbalizing certain things, and say, hey, you are a high performer here and you're delivering a ton for the organization. So I want to help you solve this. And here, this relates back to kind of the addiction thing, is one of two things will happen. Is you sit down with that individual and you kind of give them, hey, I want to give you a little extra time off here, or I want to set this schedule up for you so that you have a little more time to go do what you want, knowing in the end too that like, hey, you're not just overextending, knowing that they can still get the job done that is driving positive results for the business. Sitting down and agreeing to that and saying, hey, I'm doing this because I really care about you, and I'm noticing that like you seem frustrated at times. So let's sit and talk about what could allow you to have feel a little more grounded here so that you're not always so pissed off. Then the one of two things that'll happen is they do that, and 2 months later they're like, hey man, thank you so much. Like, I feel better, and I hope you notice the difference. Like, that really made a big, I felt like you see my high performance, and for you to go out of your way to like give me a little more leeway, like, thank you so much for that. Or the other way, and here's where it ties back to the addiction thing, is that even with that leeway, they still continue to do the same thing over and over. Then what you do is you have the ability to sit down and say, hey, you're projecting your own shit onto this organization and blaming it for something that you need to work on internally. And once again, that is extremely common and we do this in relationships, we do this in business, we do this at so many different aspects of our life, is we have something internal that we need to work on. And instead of dealing with it ourselves, we will project it onto reality and then wrestle with it in reality, which like people may think sounds a little woo-woo, but in reality, if you're a self-reflective person, you will recognize, holy fuck, I'm engaged with so many things. Once again, I think honestly, relationship is one of the easiest ways to find this, is that I continue to attract the same person over and over and get frustrated with the same exact things. And what I have found is when you go internally, meaning turn the eye inward instead of outward, and start to look at the things maybe from your childhood, from prior relationships that you haven't integrated yet and that you've kind of kept in the closet as this kind of, it's subconscious, meaning you're not consciously doing this, but you've repressed something. And here's where, like I've worked with psychedelics of all sorts to kind of be able to do this on my own system. And you don't have to use a plant medicine. You can, there's plenty of different ways to do this, but when you go in and finally start to recognize that those things were actually things that you needed to deal with internally, and then watch how that influences your relationships on the external. It's one of the most profound kind of recognitions you can have, is that, holy fuck, most of the things I've complained about in relationships and jobs were actually just a direct reflection of my own bullshit that I hadn't dealt with. And then you go in and you deal with that, and then you recognize, holy shit, I attract a different type of person. I communicate differently, which causes people to communicate differently to me. I can show up in a different state, which allows people to show up in a different state for me. It truly can change literally both the micro, meaning your day to day, but then also the macro of kind of, like I said, family relationships, personal relationships, and even relationships within the work.
Well, and since this whole thing's basically going to be about leadership, let's dive into it a little bit more. So when you talk about the, family history from childhood, the rippling effects of what your childhood may have done, relationships you were in, or everything else, one of the things I have found that is very difficult to do, especially when you're younger, it may never leave, is when you're convincing yourself of specific problems, and that, if there's a specific problem And to Tony, this problem is huge. It's the end of the world. It is literally eating you alive. But you ask 6 other people, and those 6 other people are like, yeah, that's easy. We can handle that in a text message, right? It's very, very small. Where some people will get tunnel-like focus on one specific thing, in the work environment that will never leave their brain. It haunts them all day. They think about it constantly. But what they never do is stop, take a step back, like you said, look within and assess what that problem is. And is it that big of a deal? Is it your own subconscious, your own psyche that is making that a problem? And this happens, these are career enders for people. Like these things happen. I know certain specific people that will be very high performers that have had 6 jobs in 15 years. And what will happen is there will be something that happens in the work environment, and in their brain, it eats them alive, and they make their own monster, kind of like the hardest worker in the group or whatever. And what I've found with talking with these people and counseling them is what they never did is took a step back, got ego and emotion out of it, looked at it from different perspectives, and then talked to their manager about that or whatever person is above them to unwind the bag of snakes. And, for example, you and I have talked about a bunch of different stuff. You and I don't talk that much, but when we do, it's usually a good conversation. So I go to Tony and I'm ready to quit because I feel I've been overlooked. Let's say this is just an easy one. I don't think you're paying me what I'm worth. I don't think I'm valued. I don't think, all of those things. And I stew on that every day for a month. And by the end of that month, I'm toxic, I'm unhappy, but not at one time did I go to Tony and I say, hey, Tony, dude, I feel like my production, I'm an asset to the company. You may, in the first 5 minutes of that conversation, point out 17 things that I didn't look at because I don't want to, and be able to let me know, like, hey, dude, you are good at this, but man, these other things are an issue. And I have found that is a huge problem with employees. I mean, even leadership in general is you get stuck in your own bubble, and that bubble is your bubble. And that bubble literally is only what you're thinking about. It's only what's on your mind. And without communication, that person ends up usually going down the road, right? When they can't assess it, I guess.
Yeah, and it's a great, what you just said is an incredible starting point for knowing if you're not somebody who spends a lot of time kind of self-inquiring or kind of like self-reflecting, what triggers you is an incredible place to start. Like what you just said is more of like kind of building stories, or one little thing triggers you, then you build this whole story around it internally. And then, as you said, you've never actually even addressed the actual thing with the individual that's involved. So I bring up kind of the trigger thing because I believe, and this is how I manage both my own system, and I encourage individuals who I meet with regularly is like, identify those areas that trigger you and then find that within yourself. So maybe somebody is angry all the time, and it pisses you off, and maybe it's not even overt anger, it's kind of like a subtle anger. That mechanism of, okay, I outwardly, this individual is pissing me off because they get angry all the time. What I have found, and this is backed by, like, I'm a nerd for this type of thing, and I could give several books that go deep on this subject, is if you're being emotionally triggered by that, a lot of times you've actually repressed that exact emotion that's pissing you off. So let's say somebody's overly lovey and it pisses you off, or somebody, like I said, is angry and it pisses you off. Of course, there is an objective measure of that too. If they're aggressive and they're angry all the time and they're hurt, like you visibly see them being an asshole to people, of course, there is something objective in reality there. But if it's a subtle little thing, like you said, that it's in the subtle and you've never actually even addressed that with them, a lot of times what can happen is these individuals, like that exact personality trait that's frustrating, when you sit within yourself, and here's where meditation or some type of self-reflective exercise can be really helpful, you will often find that was an emotion, and here it can even be from childhood, that you've repressed. And now, and once again, instead of dealing with that and kind of letting it express itself in your own system, it becomes a trigger in the external world. And then the best way, though, is when you find those within yourself, the aha moment becomes when you recognize, holy shit, that thing doesn't trigger me anymore. I can kind of laugh at it. I can smile at it. Even in relationship, like this petty little thing that my partner used to do, I can just kind of laugh at it. Then it really, then you kind of scratch your head and say, well, holy shit. This reality is a bit of a mirror of just kind of my own internal state. And that's why it's such an empowering moment to be able to get to there, because then instead of constantly pointing the finger and bitching about things on the external, you treat everything as a way to analyze and clean up your own system. Now, the caveat to that is that you will find sometimes like, no, that person's just an asshole, or that person is just mean all the time. But a lot of times you will find that actually it's that thing that I thought was this big scary monster in this individual, or this thing that pissed me off so badly, was really just a reflection of your own internal state.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And I will say the leadership God does like to fuck with you at times, or he certainly has fucked with me. And when I say that, if you had a deficiency in your past at a leadership level, and you've gotten through that and you've worked on it. And I think Tony and I both at the end of this will list off our favorite books for leadership, because they are very, very helpful reading some of these different books, that you may be put in a situation where now you're dealing with the old you. And I call it the leadership God, and he fucks with you. And when I say that, meaning, was I hard to approach in previous relationships or previous leadership positions? Why was I hard to approach? Whatever the case may be, all these different things that you would look at. The good thing about that is you probably know how to deal with that better. And it's like anything, the longer you've been in a leadership chair, and being a good one, you're going to have dealt with pretty much anything that the leadership God has to offer, right? You're going to have a fix or a solution potentially. The thing is as time goes on, and the more and more I learn and lead and everything else, is when you go to a specific problem and how you handle that problem with each person has to, in my opinion, you cannot handle every situation the exact same. Everybody has to, you could. I don't think it works. Everyone is going to have to be dealt with within reason a little bit differently. So let's say Tony works for me, and Tony is a guy, and I'll actually, you know what? I'll use Jerry, because Jerry Shaw. Jerry is my right-hand man. Jerry is the most dependable guy you could ever ask for. Hardest working dude, great guy, always in a good mood, right? Always positive, works hard. Jerry's number one deficiency as an employee is he is a fucking horrible leader. And he'll tell you that, right? He is not meant to lead. He chokes under pressure. He'll tell you that too. But I tell you what, when I need something done, Jerry is the first guy that I go to. Having said that, right, I cannot put Jerry in the position knowing his biggest deficiency is, I say choke under pressure. Jerry doesn't choke under pressure, but I mean, he does well under pressure, but meaning certain situations, and he can't lead people. Okay. So if I go to Jerry and say, hey, Jerry, I'm going to put 3 people under you. And Jerry immediately says, I'm not comfortable with that, whatever. And you develop, you talk, whatever, why? That part of the crew below you, you have the dependable guys that you can count on no matter what for their specific asset in the company. But when you have a guy that is a constant, problem, and let's say, Tony, you're my problem and you work below me, and okay, what is Tony's issue? So figuring it out right now, I would say, okay, Tony's issue, let's say for right now, he is a very, very competent employee. He works really hard, but occasionally Tony has some psychological outbursts, right? Like when the day goes bad, he has a little temper tantrum, whatever. He bitches about the company outwardly. He word vomits. He does whatever else. How do you handle that, right? Well, to me, I would take Tony aside and I'd say, hey, dude, man, you're a great worker, but dude, you can't keep talking shit about the higher ups and word vomit in front of the whole fucking company, dude. Like, it gets out. You have to stop that. Well, man, I can't control it. Okay. And this happens constantly. The word vomit thing's horrible. So it's like, do you put that guy on an island where he is very productive on his own, or do you counsel them? How long do you counsel them? I'm only bringing this up because I just had an entire book written to me from a guy that needed help with leadership. So I guess I'm asking you, as I'm rambling on and not making much sense, how much slack do you give a person like that, and for how long for them to pull their head out of their ass? Like,
well, my first step, and it's what I kicked off with, is like, okay, know yourself, know your people. And there comes in what you said of like, and they're actually very useful tools for identifying this. Like we use, it's called 6 Working Geniuses here. There's a plethora of them, of kind of screening. This could be candidates you're about to hire or your internal employees, to make sure that they are in a role where both their strengths and also what they enjoy doing are at least somewhat being brought forth. Because I have made this mistake a ton of times where somebody is really competent, let's say at a manager level, but then you're like, yeah, we need to get them to a senior manager, even a director level, without really kind of asking the questions of like, well, okay, what are they really good at this level? And does that scale up to the director level? And then you plug them in a position where this was an extremely competent individual at one level, but then they are out over their skis at the next level. So I bring that up because before I'm even going to address kind of maybe the very specific thing that they're doing wrong, whether it's like you said, a kind of a emotional outburst, or it's a performance thing where their team members feel like they don't know the priorities of the department. First, let's sit down and kind of map, what are your priorities? Let's make sure that we're aligned from like where you're spending your time. Okay, what are the major frustration points? And then if that alignment happens and you're still noticing kind of that same behavior, then very quickly, as you said, I do go to like getting something on paper that we both signed to say, hey, this is a documented kind of coaching or write-up, and it sucks that things have to become kind of formally HR here, but like there's a reason for it. As dorky as it is you're able to kind of get something on paper and making a very objective statement that like, hey, we have to course correct here. Like, I'm going to give you one more chance, but after that, like we will have to move in a different direction if we're not able to do that. Now, there too, like I'm able to put very clean words to that as if it always plays out that way, but that's not the case either. Because as you know, Aaron, like there are always every single instance of somebody doing something, maybe like a what you would consider like a performance review or something. There is nuance to every single one, and there's two sides to every story. So each of these looks a little different, but we have learned, even as an organization, like how we handled this 5 years ago and me as an individual handled it 5 years ago versus now, it is so different. Like, I mean, there's all the cliche sayings of like hire slow, fire fast. It's true in a lot of ways. It's like, of course, have the humility to do step one of what I said of like, make sure there's alignment, make sure there's not some big thing that you're missing or that they never kind of were aligned with that's causing the disruption. But then once that's in place, if there are two instances where that same behavior is repeated, then from my experience, it's rarely is that person going to course correct if they've had 3 chances to do so and just continue to do the same thing. Now, if it's a job competency thing, meaning like somebody's in marketing and they're just uploading something wrong to like a document that then gets plugged into another document, those types of things, there's a little more forgiveness for me if it's a technical thing, because it's like I have found over time those things will get better. If it's a personality thing where you just recognize like, damn it, this person is just not a fit here, or they just can't get their shit together, I move much faster on kind of cleaning that out than I used to. I'll be honest, Aaron, we had some instances 3 or 4 years ago where it would drag out over a year and a half, where something would get identified. You'd coach, you'd let a couple things just kind of slip through the cracks because you're like, oh, that wasn't egregious enough to sit them down and write them up. And then by the time you get to a year and you're like, we have wasted 20 hours talking about this over the last 4 months. We have 2 documented things and we're still talking about it. Whereas now that year long that it used to take gets condensed to like 2 months, where it's like, okay, you're going to get ample chances to course correct, but then we're not going to sit here and pontificate on if this person's going to get better or not. Like we will just make a decision.
And I'm glad you said that, because one of my biggest downfalls in the past is the firing fast, giving people too much leeway, changing jobs multiple times for them. it cannot be said enough for me, the hire slow, fire fast.
Yep.
If a person is toxic, they're toxic. And when I say this on the technical side, if you can teach them, that's a different story completely. Meaning,
yep.
Anything can, when I say anything, if it can be taught and it's clerical errors or whatever else, but they're a hell of an employee, they have a good guy, I don't worry about that. If they're just a fucking pain in the ass, and when I say that, meaning there's always something dramatic going on or whatever else, even if they're extremely high performer, I've gotten to the point, and again, I'm not at that level at BP, but I mean, I'm at the point with other things that I do. I don't care if you shit gold, and I don't care how much money you bring the company. If you long-term are bringing a negative vibe, a cancer, I have gotten to the point now, I'm cutting sling load. You're down the road, because long-term, I have never seen it pan out for the greater good. It may be good short-term, it may be good in the midterm, but like long-term, it doesn't pan out. And so for me, the hire slow, fire fast is huge. And when I say that, when you have 100 employees, you have to, there's a lot to pick apart with that. So you can find anything wrong with any employee. Nobody's $100 bill. But if those deficiencies are causing a cancer around you, that's when I think you need to shit can a person. And there's going to be a ton of people that listen to this and give feedback. And I always love that, right? Because there's a ton of business owners that listen in on the outdoor side. And it is amazing, these stories I get when we do a podcast like this. A guy will send a book to me about a specific employee. I'll read through it and be like, literally having fucking PTSD from dealing with the same shit that guy did. And at the end of it, he'll be like, what do you think I should do? You know what I mean? Like, because everybody deals with this, especially, when you have 100, 200, whatever employees, it's a nightmare. I mean, how much of your day is in meetings?
It's gotten a little bit better, but I mean, I'm spending on average a day between 3 to 7 hours in meetings. And I know that's a broad range, but it really does kind of vary. Like hardly ever is there a day where at least 3 hours are not allocated towards something that is set in stone. And then, there are certainly days where it's 6, 7. It used to be consistently even 8. When I was in a VP role, like I was just kind of shotgunning my energy all over the place and doing way too many things. Whereas now I have a really solid level of directors and VPs where I should be, and I actually just sent you, I am working on 2026, 2027 of laying the path of what are we trying to achieve as an organization, and then trickling that down through the teams and letting them build their own systems to achieve what I set as kind of the top line priority. So it varies, but typically that's going to sit somewhere between 3 to 7 hours a day, with the average probably being more closer to 4.5 than that upper end.
And through the time, how much time? When do we need to get off this thing? I know you're crazy busy, so
I'm good until 2:30, so we don't have to rush.
Okay, cool. So, and we've covered all kinds of crazy stuff, but in your time from ground level, literally, like you started from the bottom up, I would say that is by far a strong benefit for you as a leader, because you know what everybody's going through, because you started at the bottom. When I say the bottom, you know what I mean? Yep. You worked your way up.
Yep.
So, as you look through the growth of BP, and the growth of BP, how much of that can we bring up?
We can bring up whatever.
It's like Kurt
actual specific, we can, we can, let's be a little bit careful around certain numbers. We can use percentages. Yep.
So I think Kurt sent me something yesterday, I think BP Outdoor, and it took a lot to get this going, and it's starting to go in the right direction as far as BP Outdoor, but I think we're 150 something % over last year to date.
Yep.
Which is great, right? But, could it be better? Can it be bigger? There's a lot going there. But as you look at the growth, Tactical has been insane. Tactical's, I don't know what they're up, but Tactical's insane too. Sorry, go ahead. What were you going to say?
No, sorry. You cut out for a second. I didn't say. I clicked a button, but I didn't say anything.
Oh, gotcha. Tactical, outdoor, and BP main are all growing. So Tony sent me basically what is the other bane of my existence is I hate doing is Tony has projections 2026, potential pitfalls, what could happen, how do you fix those? Like when I read through everything he sent me, I was like, fuck, I hate my life if I had to do that shit again. You're good at it, it seems like. I mean, that was very well written. But when you're projecting, right, the growth, how we're going to grow, if we have a hitch in the giddy up here, how do we sidestep a couple landmines? What do we do to better the business? I mean, total plan, right? And I read through that last night and again this morning. That compared to 2 years ago, were you in a position 2 years ago to do what you sent me yesterday? Would you have felt comfortable 2 years ago doing that?
Nope. No. And that's where like the clarity comes from. And that's where as you've mentioned several times, just having your ass in the damn seat is so beneficial because what I felt like, what I delivered to you, like what you would consider is just like, a 2-year annual plan or next year's annual plan and forecast. There's nothing, if you would read that as an outside person, you'd be like, there's nothing groundbreaking in here. Like it's not rocket science, and you can relate to this, Aaron, I'm sure, is that I was only able to deliver something that's very simplified and very direct like that because I've digested so much of our business operation over the last 6 years. So that became, for me, a thing of like, whoa, like now I am at the point where you have the thought, and this is actually for me a great, like, I will compliment it. Like, this is when you know you're growing is like, how the fuck did I not do this before? Meaning it provides like what had happened and why that was so important now to me to deliver was because you're always evolving as a business and you build a whole infrastructure, both teams, systems, processes around kind of current version of the organization. Well, if you start to evolve quicker from a positioning, and it relates exactly to what you just said, like tactical is taking off, shoes are taking off, outdoors taking off, but we do have some categories like athletic that are kind of in a maintenance phase. But if you don't get ahead of that as a leader and address the organization from the top down to say, hey, here's where our growth is, here's what that projects to, then what happens is there's a lag in your infrastructure where people are still operating off of the born primitive of 2 years ago. So you look at the time, let's say product and designers and marketers are spending on, like, let's use the example I just gave, the athletic category versus these emerging categories. And you're like, holy shit, we are spending a disproportionate amount of time on something that should not be receiving it. And that doesn't mean you just let those things die, those other categories, but you put them in a maintenance phase, meaning you assign an appropriate kind of amount of time for everyone to be working through those. And then your high upside plays, the ones that have extreme momentum, you take and reallocate resources because the path to achieving, like you said, 100% growth or even 50% growth, 60% growth, it's the path of least resistance to start to grow the business versus thinking you can just do everything very competently. And that's, to answer your question, like 2 years ago, I didn't know how to even delegate my own time, meaning I was still effective, but I was trying to be effective in too many different lanes. Whereas now, very quickly, I can identify, okay, that's a high upside move, or no, we should not be spending a disproportionate amount of time there. And that's where I think you become extremely effective because you have hyper focus on certain areas. And then the other areas, you still give them a certain amount of care and love, but it's just, it's proportionally correct to where the business is going. And that's it. I see that everywhere, both here at BP, but then also with other businesses is people are leaking so much energy and they've never actually put their finger on what is moving the business. And when you sit down with them and say, okay, let's do this a little, like this shouldn't all just be data. There is a little bit of intuitive and kind of gut call here. When you put everything together, Pareto's principle will arise over and over where you recognize that 20% of what you're doing is actually driving 80% of the results. And if you can lean into that 20% versus spending the same amount of time on the other 80% that's not really driving anything, it will disproportionately positively affect your business when you're able to focus in that manner.
Yeah, and I think, with what we're talking about, one of the things I kind of circle back to as far as spending, when you're assessing how the company's doing. Okay. So let's just say hypothetically, BP has, we have a clothing line, which we do. We have a tactical clothing line, an outdoor clothing line. We have the shoes. We're going to end up, hypothetically doing backpacks, and then we're going to end up doing gun cases, and we're going whatever. And then we have the academy, all these different things that we may do, may not do, or whatever else. When you're looking at that, and we talked about this with the academy, right? Like with the academy, and this is the schools that we teach in the classes or whatever else, is can you justify whatever the dollar amount to run the academy when it is very difficult to quantify what it does for the actual company, right? So if we're donating a ton of time into the academy and manpower for marketing and everything else, and that is being taken away from tactical or outdoor or the shoes, right? You do, whether or not the new cool, like something may seem super cool and new, it's Tony's job to say, hey, we don't make any money from this. I don't know how much we're getting out of it in marketing. We've got to cut sling load on this. Like, it's just not profitable. And that is at a high level of leadership where you have to really take a step back and put everything on the table and say, okay, where's the priorities at? What, like you said, with the BP main of kind of a rebuild or whatever, that starts at the top level, but then it's how do you rebuild it? What do you change? How do you change it? And that's why I asked about 2 years ago, knowing how much you've developed, as a leader and everything you've done. 2 years ago, looking at everything that we're doing now, I would imagine you were just stressing the fuck out, working like a chicken with his head cut off, doing your best. Would that be? Yeah.
And there's where like, and here's where I will compliment Bear. I'll compliment Mal as well, the two founders, is that like, we were fucking swinging for the fences, meaning we were the home run hitter who hit 45 home runs a year, but he was hitting 210, meaning we were missing a lot as well. And there's where now we can still hit 45 home runs and we can hit 310 instead of 210, for those of you that understand baseball terminology and batting averages, because we're way better. And this is something I very much put a focus on, is making sure that there's a defined measure of success to start. And that shouldn't be restrictive. The goal here isn't to be a data humper all the time where it's always, you got to have a number. It's all about money. But you need to have some measure of what success looks like, or there's just way too much subjectivity that gets involved, and there's too much kind of gut feelings. And your gut, you should trust at times. Your intuitive sense, you 100% should trust at times. But in the game we're playing of trying to really scale as a business, if you rely too much on that, it can lead you not even astray, but just into ventures that require a ton of time and energy, but that actually aren't driving the business. So yeah, getting really fucking clear on like what is moving the needle. Let's be able to answer that. And then there still should be room. Like there should be room for even things that are more just fun and brand focused, for things that are more of like, hey, this has high risk, but there's upside here. Let's put some time into it. But if you're doing that and you haven't identified your big needle movers, that's where you really a lot of times will reflect over how your time and the team's time is being spent. And you're like, holy shit, we are wasting so much time, energy, and resources on things that actually are not moving the needle here.
Yeah, and the data is, I mean, I agree you don't want me to be a total data dork, but another big downfall of mine in previous years, when I say big downfall, there is multiple types of data, right? There's actual hard factual data. There is a little bit of redneck reasoning data where you've got a little data, but you're guessing, but it's a pretty educated guess. And then there's literally the, I know this is doing great because I saw something on social or whatever. So if you take, I'm not going to bring up the company's name, a specific clothing company that's in the outdoor space, from the outside looking in, they had every heavy hitter known to man promoting them. It looked like they were crushing the world. And as I understand it, they lost $11 million in 1 year. But from the outside looking in, if you were basing starting a clothing company on that, and you're looking at like, man, they're everywhere. I see them all over. They're this, they're that. They've got all these big names. But that's not data. That's a fucking guess, and it's a smokescreen. Because as I understand it, they lost $10 or $11 million in 1 year. And I think that's pretty hard fact.
And Aaron, it's the same thing. It scales from individuals to then companies, meaning the guy that has the sexy car, the nice, all these things, and then you actually get to know them a little bit, and you're like, oh, the same word you just used, like this is a bit of a smokescreen. And honestly, that's companies as well. Is we are going to project this when in reality, you learn a little bit about their financials, and you're like, oh, you guys are a shitstorm. And it is mind-boggling how common that is, even at the publicly traded level. And there's where, like, I'm speaking slightly out of turn. This is more my network of individuals who advise kind of companies like that. And they're like, you would not believe how big of a shit show some of these boards are as far as how they're operating. And yeah, it's the same on the individual level. The individual that has all the nice things, but then it is an absolute shit show in their day to day. That scales out to organizations, which is why it's so important to have the foundational pieces in line, because it gives stability to the organization then, rather than trying to project this smokescreen that is actually a complete facade.
Yeah, and again, the data, right? And I'm going to bring this up to give Bruno crap. Hopefully he doesn't listen to this. And I'll give you a prime example. Yesterday, in the middle of a meeting, Bruno says, Tactical is selling 4-to-1 sun shirts compared to outdoor. I know that is total bullshit because he has no idea. And I almost said, Bruno, do you need some wet wipes for your hands? Because you're pulling those numbers out of your ass just to fuck with him. Bruno and I get along great. That is not data. And unless there's some specific way that they're tracking that, there's no way for Bruno to know that Tactical is selling 4-to-1 sun shirts unless I'm missing something. Would you not? I don't want you to take a side, but that was just something he knows the sun shirts.
Oh no, I will take. I agree, and that's it's actually my role to be kind of the check and balance on that, because what happens is, if somebody in leadership starts to say subjective things that they actually have no measure to go off of, people underneath them who just either haven't been here a long time or just don't even really know our systems enough to know if that's possible or not, they will start to believe it. Then that becomes a truth that, well, quote unquote truth, that is now within the company that people are now reflecting and spouting themselves, when, as you said, like, I know our systems in and out. So a comment like that, my question would be like, how are you measuring that? And what you find is a lot of people, and it's not meant to be I got you, you're in trouble now. It's more of like hey, be really fucking intentional about the words you're using and the numbers you're saying, because the right people, and this is outside of business too, this is just life in general, you're going to run into somebody that knows I'm not even saying they're smarter than you, they just know a little bit more about the ecosystem that you're in. And there is nothing that will make you look silly more than something like that, where you're saying something that isn't grounded in a reality. And of course, you can still say those things, but make it clear that this is just I think this, not that this is the truth. So no, it's a great example, and that applies to life too. And there's where you get the silver tongue of people who talk a big game, but then as you really break down, you're like, you have no objective measure to really validate anything you're saying.
Yeah, and that's where I think it is very important, and I brought that up because I got to fuck with Bruno about that today, because there's always happy playfulness. It's competitive between Tactical Outdoor, where I would probably in turn come back and be like, Bruno, on the outdoor side, we're selling 3-to-1 op pants to Tactical. Just as a reminder of like, hey, motherfucker, I can make shit up too. Right, because I wear the op pants sometimes. Like, man, I think we're crushing your guys' sale. That's a playful thing, right? That's just me and Bruno fucking around. Yeah. But in reality, though, those type of hyperbole kind of comments, and not that one specifically, but in the word vomit thing is what I'm talking about. You said it best. You have to be very intentional when you're in a meeting of what you're saying, that it is very deliberate and there is some data behind it. Because I can very easily say something like, man, I think the podcast is just crushing it. I know what the downloads are, and holy shit, I don't know what revenue we're bringing in, but it's got to be a lot. think that's a fair comment, right? That's I didn't make up any words or I didn't make up any numbers or whatever else. But if I was like, man, that podcast is bringing $150,000 a month to outdoor. Well, fuck, I hope Tony doesn't ask me to prove that, because there's no way I can't prove it, right? All I can say is I think it's a valid marketing resource. But after that, it's not trackable. And that goes to as far as how much effort you're putting into different things. How much money are you putting into different things? I would say podcast wise or a YouTube page wise, you can at least see views and impressions and have a guess that it's probably making some sales. But as far as like, you can actually track paid ads, on a paid ad what you're making. And actually, I want you to talk about paid ads for a second, because obviously I get tons of comments about BP is everywhere because we have a lot of paid ads. Talk about how those paid ads work and how we track those.
Yeah. So any business that's in the kind of direct consumer e-com world, just meaning you have a website, you're selling to people online. When you hear paid ads, paid social, there's digital media, like there's a bunch of different words that people use to label it. It just means you're using assets that you are paying Meta, Instagram, Facebook to run ads on the company's behalf. And then how the attribution works is that they're tracking your clicks, which at this point, everyone kind of knows that that's occurring. Apple did with the iOS 14 or something update, did make it harder to do so. But if you're scrolling social media and you see a sponsored by ad, that is paid advertising. And for us, and here's where I'll be very candid, is that for us, that has been one of our largest acquisition channels. And to define acquisition, it just means people who have not shopped from the brand before. That's an incredible way for us to get in front of them, because as we all know, people are using social media and being able to kind of target certain demographics based off their interest, age, kind of what like whether it's the hunting community, tactical community, athletic community, is really valuable as a company. But now, and this will be a slow shift, and here's where I just said candidly, is that we are kind of going through a phase where you start to diversify outside of that, meaning you become big enough where pulling on some bigger levers, whether like the dorky example that really isn't used that much by kind of high growth, kind of what you would call like more current companies, is like commercials, like TV commercials, paid like connected TV, which would be like the Hulu, running ads on there. You do, and then even bigger mass marketing. There's other online kind of levers you can pull there, where we are at a size where those things start to make sense as well, so that you can get to the masses. Because even on social, you would think like, well, everyone's going to see it. It's not really the case, and there are large demographics that are not as active on social that you kind of miss out on. But yeah, paid social, kind of the Facebook, Instagram, the Google kind of search, like those are as a high growth direct consumer business. A lot of times it's your most efficient way to acquire customers. And anyone that's in any type of business knows that like you have a funnel, and if there aren't people coming into that funnel, meaning new customers, eventually your system's going to run dry, because you're going to churn customers, meaning you're going to have people that come in and buy, and they buy once and then they never come back. Now, and Aaron, you know this, like the goal is to have a strong lifetime value, or LTV, meaning you get people into your funnel, then you both have a really good product, you have a really good brand, and you have really good marketing tactics to keep them in that funnel as long as possible, so that they stay loyal to the brand. And of course, you receive the benefit of their purchases. And if you're able to fill your funnel and not churn out the bottom, meaning spit out customers that bought once, bought twice, and then left, that's how you build a profitable, sustainable business. Is you have more people coming in and spending money over time than you have people leaving out the bottom. And that's how you achieve growth. That's how you achieve success on paid social. And ultimately, that's how you achieve profitability, is you know that you can acquire customers at a first order margin that allows you to be aggressive. And here's where your customer acquisition costs would come in, is that, you're able to go acquire customers in a sustainable way, which will quite literally keep the lights on within your business. So probably a little more dorky than I needed to go, but I think that gives at least kind of the 2-minute spiel on why you see us so much on paid social, why Why do they spend so much? Why am I seeing them all the time? It is because that is our most efficient lever right now for acquiring and getting in front of new customers.
Yeah, and I think that when you are breaking things down, and this is going to be for anybody looking at starting a business that's got one or whatever else, marketing has definitely changed over the years a lot, right? Like when I say this, outdoor space, sports, whatever, but like outdoor space specifically, or even in the tactical, there was magazines, right? And that was a big, there was TV and magazines, whatever else. And then now on social, getting 1 million to 1.5 million impressions a week or a month on one specific person's Instagram page isn't really that difficult to do if they have a big following. And then, you're also looking at, you have the paid ads, influence, you have all these different things. And then deciphering which direction you want your business to go for that can be a gamble, as you're moving forward, because you don't want to give a shit ton of product out to influencers if you don't know what you're going to get back from all of those influencers, unless you just have a very rich, wealthy financial backer that doesn't mind pissing away money. You have to be fairly decisive with it. With the paid ads, you can track that. That's a huge one. But you can't do just paid ads. You have to have, more than that. The problem is and Tony can speak to this far more than me, it's fucking expensive. Really expensive, right? And when I say that, you have to have a plan before you start diving into any of these things. And when I say a plan, and you're much better at this than me, if you don't have some sort of a budget with some very calculative data, you can put your company in financial jeopardy before you even know it with specific marketing campaigns, in my opinion.
Yeah. And you hit it on the head when you said, like, knowing what you're trying to achieve, carving out a specific budget based off your current financials. Let's say you're running a plumbing company and you're doing $600,000 a year, and you're like, damn it, I know we could do $1 million, and I think I have the infrastructure to support that. I want to run some online ads. That's actually a really wise thing to do, but you want to make sure you have a system in place, because two things can happen. Like in that example, if you know who you are, you know your offer, you know your unique offer in the market that you're in. So let's say that's a 60-mile radius. You can get really specific with, hey, I'm going to create this really cool asset that shows that, hey, I'm just making shit up, but like your first visit, our first visit to your house to fix your shitter is free, and you run a paid ad, you will be able to track, okay, how many signups did we get, or how many calls did we receive from that? Or you create a landing page where people can submit something, and once again, I'm just shooting from the hip, but that's an example where like, that's a very regional targeting. Where people start to really piss money away is that they opened, Aaron's new release. Like Aaron comes up with a new kind of release for a bow, and he's like, okay, we did $500,000 this year. I'm going to carve out $50,000 and just dump it into paid advertising. What you will do at a large scale a lot of times is, if you haven't built a really strong brand presence, now you're a bad example because you are a pretty well-known face within the industry, that you would actually be a great person to like jumpstart, say a release company. But let's say you were a no-name where nobody knew you. If you haven't established kind of a brand identity, and that's where I'll segue here sidebar really quickly, is that paid works so well for us because the first 5 years of the company, we didn't run a single paid ad. It was all about CrossFit events, getting out in front of people, building a real kind of loyal customer base, so that when we turned on paid ads, then there had already been a chatter. There had been kind of an underbelly of recognition surrounding Born Primitive. So we kind of hit the ground running. And then, as you said, we were able to, and we have a great partner, CTC, who is our paid marketing kind of partner, where I can check at any point throughout the day exactly what our numbers are. And we project out for every month what our spend is going to be, what our target revenue is going to be, efficiency metrics to make sure that we're never spending disproportionately more than the revenue we're bringing in. And as you know, Aaron, I could talk for 2 hours just on the tracking side of that. But this all goes, it's just to say that having like paid advertising sounds sexy, like social advertising, of like, oh, that's an easy lever, we're going to make a ton of money. But there are some factors that have to be in place in order for that to be the case, unless you just have a groundbreaking product, meaning you just have something that's so nuanced on the market that you're going to break the internet when you run ads for it. And you do. Honestly, you see companies that can achieve that just because they have a really unique offering, and it just hits the zeitgeist in a way that people go crazy over it. But I have seen exactly what you said. I've seen people piss away, hundreds of thousands of dollars because they think, oh, I'm going to create some cool assets and then just run them in a paid account. And it's like, oh God, there's a level of nuance to this, and there's a level of self-awareness that you need to have as to where your brand actually stands within the market and how unique what you're offering really is.
Yeah. And and you can also, I guess, in inverse, you can sell snake oil with enough marketing money for a while as well. And that happens quite often too. You can have a relatively shitty product, and with enough marketing, it'll kick off for a while. It'll do well for a while. And again, that's that smokescreen we talked about. But when you're coming out with, or you're promoting a specific product or whatever else, there is so much that goes into this. Do you mind if I use like the Frontier pant?
Yeah, of course.
So like when we first came out with the Frontier pant, that was kind of that was a pant that I had wanted for a long time. We worked on it really hard. And then, you have the margins, you have everything else that you're trying to deal with. And when we first came out with those, who we were using at first to sew them and everything else, the price point was pretty high, and we didn't sell as many. And I'll have you dive in here in a minute. We were able to find a different manufacturer and be able to drop the price point of that pant. And that literally kind of goes to show price is huge, right? When I say that, the Frontier pant, I don't know how many we sell now, but it literally was a game changer with changing a manufacturer and the same marketing, same everything else, being able to drop that price a little bit. So price is involved in all of this, but no matter what, like, you have to be competitive with the product. You have to be competitive with the pricing. And if everything's equal, whoever has the most marketing dollars after that point is probably going to win. But that Frontier pant is a good example. I think that's one of our number one sellers now, where before at that other price, it didn't do well at all.
Yeah. It's a great example, not only in kind of some of the specifics we were just talking about, but as you're mentioning, kind of the macro, which is 100 different variables of being self-aware enough to know where you actually fit within the market. Because candidly, like, you can get cocky, meaning you hit a home run on a couple products and you start to think like, oh, we're a premium in every single product. And of course, we as a brand, like, we don't position ourselves as Lulu, meaning like they have a team of 150 designers kind of doing their stuff. Like we like to fall, like, we are certainly not a middle of the road. Like, we are closer to premium, but we're not a premium. But if you start to think, oh, we're premium, we can price ourselves premium, then what starts to happen is you start to disconnect from the actual customer who is supporting you by making a purchase, because they start to get it and say, hey, I actually like you guys because I didn't need to pay $120 for a legging. I could pay $70, but now you guys went, and I'm just making up numbers. Now you went to $100. And like, at that point, I'd rather just go get the 120 legging because I actually think it's a little bit better. And so just another example of like really being self-aware on where you fit within the market. Where are your competitors? How good is your product actually? And there's like, that's a hard question to answer, because entrepreneurs and all businessmen want to think that their product is the best. But it as much as it may sting a little bit, to be honest about where your product actually is, it will save you an ass pain on the back end when you aren't kind of delusional as to where your product fits in the market. So yeah, we're covering kind of like there's so many base principles that go into kind of managing a business. And then as you start to view from this lens, if you're somebody that is interested in getting into business, or you run a business now, it's very cool that as you develop, it's almost like a new language. As you develop this language, you can apply this to any business. Like you said, you can tout a smokescreen through marketing levers, but the LTV that I mentioned earlier, lifetime value, if you have a shitty product, yeah, you can convince people one time to come purchase. They're not going to come back again. And then they're going to tell their friends, And the virality of people's word of mouth is not to be understated either. And then all of a sudden, yeah, you had sexy numbers for a year or two, but then the company in year 3 just absolutely shits the bed. And trust me, we've had a lot of competitors do that exact thing. Or macroeconomics, meaning the market or the country as a whole, or the world, the economy starts to turn downward, and you were overly reliant on these one or two levers, and then that market shifts, and all of a sudden you recognize, holy shit, we don't know how to be profitable without the tailwinds that a kind of positive economic trend was taking us. And then that's when you see a lot of other businesses go out. And then you get into the PE world of, like you said, having a backing. Cough, cough, Noble is a perfect example of this. Is they had a ton of PE money get dumped into the organization. They overextended themselves in so many different angles. And yes, they became nationally recognized in like a 1 or 2 year time frame on a scale that I'm still impressed by how quickly they did it. But then that money dried up, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, you actually don't know how to be profitable as a company. Like you are the 19-year-old who had a rich daddy and goes to college and has $100,000 to spend, and then at year 4 is broke and daddy won't give you any more money, and you don't know how to live life. So yeah, just another word of caution too, which this doesn't apply to the everyday person, but it's the setting up sustainable profitability, even at the detriment sometimes of top line growth, is a really wise way to approach any type of business, because things are going to change. The market's going to shift. Factors are going to change over time. But if you have a solid base of profitability that you can project every year, you're in a really good position to not only grow, but then to also just be sustainable over time.
No, I agree. And I think, obviously anybody listening in, because I get a ton of people always have ideas and products. I mean, when I say ideas, products they want to come out with and, start a business. And I'm always very cautious to make sure they understand, at least from my perspective, of like, okay, here's all the shit you're looking at, which is, fairy dust and sparkly roses and shit. But you've left out 80 other percent of this equation. And I'll bring up, when we're looking at this, a lot of people always forget warranty, right? When they're looking at, they have this awesome product, they got to find a manufacturer, and they have friends that are going to help promote it, and the marketing's low. And then they forget that, oh yeah, some people aren't going to like this shit, and they're going to break it, and whatever. And then all of a sudden they've potentially not forecasted for all the potential variables, warranty being one of them. And when you do that, especially when you're getting started, you can end the company as fast as it began, because you're not factoring in all of the data or estimated data, getting that kicked off. And when I say that, like when with everything you've had to deal with, your time with BP, I don't know, I won't talk about total dollars, but BP is very large on the BP main side. And sustainable wise, as far as warranty with clothing, is much different than if you're building some kind of a mechanical device on the warranty side. And there's also all of the back end side of this, meaning how much money would you say is going to go into a new website, for example? Like, what would you guess is a new website for BP?
Are you asking if we were to do one, or if somebody that was starting their own company? You said for BP, right?
Yeah. So no, I'm meaning, things to think about. What does it cost? And you can pull numbers out of your ass, but get in an estimate for the back end side of things. So the shopping experience, what you're paying for the website, the shopping experience, all of the SKUs, everything that has to go onto that website. What does it cost to build a website for BP Main, BP Tactical, and BP Outdoor? What dollar amount are you looking at to pay someone to build a happy shopping experience website for that company, for BP?
Yeah, I mean, let's $250,000 a year or something like that.
At a minimum. And
of course, yeah.
Now you're looking at $250,000 for a website, and then social media. Who's going to run the social media page? Who's going to run the YouTube page? And then you have to pay for the inventory software. And people don't think about this because you're a redneck. You came up with a cool product. inventory software is a fucking nightmare, right? Because you have to keep the inventory between the mayo and the mustard, or you get audited because, you know, when you file taxes, it's very decisive as far as the numbers, right? Or I say decisive. You have to be very accurate with the numbers. So you've got a website, you've got inventory software, you got the people running that. Pretty soon as this grows, your little cool piece of gear that you had, you got to have 25 employees and an insane web, and it's a nightmare. And it is not easy to do. And I'm going off the deep end here, but I don't think people realize, I guess what I'm saying is what it takes to run a company. It is a fucking nightmare.
Yeah, and there's where foundational principles and systems become so important. Meaning the same way when you manage people, having a system for how to both address kind of lack of performance, but then also high performance in pipelines to get people in better positions. You should have and here's where, I mean, even if you're starting out, let's use the plumbing example again. You're somebody who's worked 30 years at a company and you're finally done and you're like, I'm starting my own plumbing business. You can do this through books. You can do it through podcasts, or just find somebody that is competent in business and pay them for an hour of their time. Or what I've found is people want to share. If somebody really knows, they're more than willing, if they recognize that you're genuine and that you're really just curious because you're trying to do it yourself. They will knowledge share so much, because I think any well-grounded person that's become knowledgeable in a lane, like that actually is the most fulfilling part, is just sharing that knowledge. That's better than making another 10% in your salary. It's like being able to share with people who are on a similar or beginning path that you were on is really important. So for those that maybe have an idea or are currently running a business that's a shit show or just maybe not optimized, the getting the base principles, and what Aaron was just referencing is like your cash flow. Like, how much cash do you have on hand? What are you projecting to do in revenue? What are you going to have to dish out in fixed costs? What are you going to have to dish out in order to rebuy your inventory? And there's where Bear and I laugh all the time. We're like, if we ever sell Born Primitive, we're doing a services business, because you don't have to buy inventory. Because as you know, Aaron, like, yeah, you can make $1 million, but then you're cutting a PO to your supplier for $250,000 the following week. So all of a sudden, then you made that $1 million. You pay out payroll, which is $200,000. Then you pay out your rent, your lights, your utilities. That's another $50,000. Then you cut that check for $250,000 to your supplier. All of a sudden, you're looking around. You're like, holy shit, we made $1 million last week, and we have 100,000 left, and we have payroll coming up in another 2 weeks. So then that's kind of the urgency that, or before I even go on a tangent then about what that creates downstream, it's more about, hey, have those foundational principles, a cash flow doc, a revenue projector, just some base principles that you're measuring success of your business by, because it will provide a clarity that allows you to make decisions that will 100% lead to higher efficiency, better clarity for yourself and your team. And yeah, it's crazy how often that is not the case, where those things are not in place. And even compliments to, I mean, we did it for a couple of years. Like, you can run a business without those, but once you get them, you have the oh shit moment of like, how the hell did we do this before having this?
Yeah. And I would say, like, with what we're talking about, and I think you've seen it with me, I'm far more reserved and kind of a chicken shit when it comes to spending money in comparison to Bear. Now, Bear is a very intelligent person, but that motherfucker is aggressive. And to a point, I'm semi-shell-shocked to present him anything, because he's going to blow the shit. I mean, he gets excited, which is good. And Bear is an amazing human, and I love Bear to death, but he's got to keep his horn in his pants sometimes, because the dude gets excited. And then all of a sudden, you know, you have this idea, and then, you know, he's wanting to dump a shit ton of money into it because he's very aggressive, and it's worked really well for him, where I'm like, hold the fuck on. Am I going to get blamed for this? Because my idea was much, you know, low key. And when I say that, there's not a right or wrong, but you definitely, I'm much more reserved about certain things, where Bear is, I would say, the polar opposite. Everything is going to be at the highest level with Bear. And I'll use the, you know, when we did the box with the Betty Ross shoes and the pistol and everything else, how much did that consume BP doing that?
I mean, I mean, just the materials alone, we paid like 70 grand in materials. And then, that's just the boxes. And I mean, what you're saying is really important if you're on a team of individuals to recognize is like, it's really good to have the extremes of each, meaning if you have a bear on your team, that will offer disproportionate value to the organization. But if there isn't a checks and balances for somebody who thinks more kind of slow paced and prudent, then it will definitely burn the organization at times. And it literally almost is like a baseball team again. It's like having individuals that, you have your average hitter that isn't swinging for the fences, but they're getting on base, they're stealing bases. Then you have that 5-hole hitter who has 50 home runs but hits 200. Like, you got to have a mixed dynamic because, if you have no one that's willing to take a risk, which is actually more common, you will just kind of stay where you're at, and it'll be like you won't ever have like these big kind of peaks as an organization. But if you have a bunch of people that only know how to take risks and really don't know how to like kind of set up the systems to track those big risks, then you will certainly dump and burn a lot of money at times.
And when I say that, again, I am a big fan of Bear. He's very aggressive and he's done very well with what he does. But like with one of the business propositions or I don't know what you want to call it, that I had presented the crew at BP for future, like the meeting with Bear was about 35 seconds. Fuck yeah, win, right? Whatever you need, do it. And I'm like, holy. And then I got approved for a certain amount. And then the next meeting was do more. So now I've kind of learned we have a few people in those meetings, right? Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's a group effort. You know, it takes a village where we all sit down. You've got aggressive Bear, which is great. You need that guy. You got very calculating Tony, right? You're very calculating and you're looking at it, you know, obviously multiple other people in the team. But it does take the village because you can get in trouble really quick. Now, it's done very well for Bear, but when I say calculating, you know, you're talking from the bottom up when you're looking at, I don't know, we're going to come out with a bow. We're not, right? But you look at coming out with a bow, right? It's like I have this design and this idea, then you have the engineering, the manufacturing, you have everything else. You got to have a lot of data in the beginning, in the middle, and in the end. Otherwise, you're negative 300,000 to 3 million before it even kicks off, and you're at a deficit. And it is very, any business owner listening to this, I'm sure, is either yelling in positivity or negativity at the microphone right now, thinking, "Fuck, I've done that," or "Holy shit, I was about to do that." I mean, these are day-to-day issues with, you know, running a big business. So.
100%.
Well, I think we've taken enough time for everybody listening in on do's and don'ts in business. Hopefully you learned something from this. But Tony, I appreciate the friendship. I appreciate giving me the opportunity at Born Primitive. It's been great. It's definitely helped my mental and psychological well-being moving with BP. It's been awesome. So, and I appreciate you coming on the podcast.
Of course. Well, ditto back to you and appreciate everything you've done for the brand. And yeah, if I'm always happy to hop back on if we want to explore. I'm sure there's 5 other kind of lanes we could go down. So more than happy to come back on if you ever need to plug in a guest.
Cool. No, that sounds good, dude. I appreciate it, man. Thanks for everybody tuning in, and we'll be back with you next week.